Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today I'm reviewing Guards by Terry Pratchett. This is one of his many Discworld books and is in fact the very first of the City Watch sequence within the Discworld series. There is a total of 8 books in this sequence, I believe. Guards is the very first one and it was published in 1989. This is often named as one of the best Discworld books to start with if you're new to the series, which after reading it I can agree with. I think it would be a very good book to start with if you're completely new to Discworld books. I'm not completely new to them. I've probably read at this point about 10 of the books. I wouldn't call myself particularly knowledgeable about the Discworld books, but I do enjoy them every now and again. This one I was quite keen on because it is a satire of a police procedural, and that's a format of story that I quite enjoy. I like a good old detective mystery. I hadn't read a detective mystery set in the Discworld before. On the Discworld? On the Discworld. Makes more sense, geographically. In this book, we follow the members of the City Watch, which is the Discworld version of the police, as they try and solve some murders that appear to be done by a dragon. The City Watch is a very much neglected part of the city of Ankh-Morpork's, not really government, but I guess institutions. And they are a typical group of losers who are led by the protagonist of this book, Captain Sam Vimes. At the beginning of the book, we find him drunk, falling into a gutter. That image of the policeman falling into the gutter drunk is very much an indicator for the kind of tropes that Guards plays with. Sam Vimes is an interesting protagonist in that he is your typical detective anti-hero type. He is perpetually drunk. He doesn't really care about much at all until, of course, he does. He doesn't really think much about his morality until, again, he is forced to by the plot of having to solve a murder case. And he seems to be a pretty absent boss. His colleagues, at the beginning of the book, numbering just 2 others, as the third one got killed in the pursuit of duty. At the same time as we get this introduction to Vimes and his men, there is also a mysterious meeting of a secret society that's basically the Discworld version of the Freemasons. Like, they have a secret knock and hoods and silly names. Anyway, they meet to think up a plot to overthrow the city. And their genius plot is that they're going to summon a dragon from a magic book, have that dragon cause chaos, and then also produce a hero to defeat the dragon and become the king of the city. The city government is not a monarchy. It's also not a democracy. It's a republic led by a man in charge called the Patrician. And this secret brotherhood is not very happy about that. Therefore, they want this whole ridiculous dragon plot to lead to a monarchy. At the same time as we see these events brewing, we also follow a young man who has grown up in a dwarf community despite being 6 foot something, being sent away by his adopted parents into the city to build a new life there. And this young man is named Carrot, as the book tells you, not because of his hair, but because of his shape. He's a big, burly, very innocent young man who comes into the city, gets a job at the City Watch, and is very keen on doing things by the book. So you have these old, disillusioned, depressed, badly paid, badly treated officers of the law. You have a young, innocent, very morally motivated young man joining them, and you have a secret brotherhood trying to bring the city into chaos. And if you've read any Terry Pratchett book, well, if you've read any Terry Pratchett book, you've probably read this one as well. But if you're familiar with his writing at all, then you'll know that that mixture of characters is a beautiful recipe for a hilarious and also a very well-written murder mystery that, despite being a parody of the genre, also is a really good example of it. Terry Pratchett has this amazing ability to really play with storytelling tropes, and that's tropes of character, like Captain Sam Vimes, who is the archetypal detective anti-hero, but he also plays with tropes of storytelling, of the way that plots work out. He does this in such a self-aware way that, if used by a less capable writer, would almost certainly be a shorthand for lazy writing. A lot of the time when in a story you have the characters being aware of the fact that they're in a story, that's used to disguise lazy storytelling. To have the characters go, oh yeah, this is a cliche, I know that. But Terry Pratchett does that while still being quite clever with how he uses those tropes. I don't know if any of that makes any sense. But for example, one of the running jokes in this story are the idea that 1,000,000 to 1 chance is almost certainly going to go your way, because 1,000,000 to 1 chance of anything happening in a book means that that one is bound to happen. And that's sort of used as a joke throughout, and then also actually plays quite an important part in the resolution of the plot. And in not as simple a way as the characters going, haha, there's 1,000,000 to 1 chance of this exact thing happening that's going to get us out of this pickle that the authors put ourselves in, and then that exact same thing happens. But rather, I can't really talk about how clever this book is because I'm not as clever as the book. And so me trying to retell what Terry Pratchett very cleverly did with the writing is almost certainly futile. Just believe me that he is so familiar with how detective novels work, obviously how fantasy novels work, how stories work, that he can really smartly play with these things while elevating the individual elements above the genre of pure satire, pure parody. This isn't just a parody of a detective story, it is also a detective story in itself. One thing that surprised me about this book, after having read some other Terry Pratchett works, is how overtly political this is. People who say that Terry Pratchett's writing is not political, mostly angry right-wingers on Twitter, clearly haven't paid attention to his work, because he is very political on the sort of personal level in a lot of his works. But in this one in particular, he directly criticizes the institution of the monarchy. This was written in 1989, when Britain was a monarchy. In 2024, Britain is still a monarchy. And having this really overt criticism of the monarchy by having his characters, and I mean the characters that we are supposed to root for and that we're supposed to agree with, criticizing not just the particular monarchy that is established in the book, but just the idea of monarchy overall, I found surprising. In particular because at some point in his life, Sir Terry Pratchett clearly accepted a knighthood. I don't know if he changed his mind or if I'm reading too much into the politics expressed in just one particular story. But it is certainly worth noting. This book is very clearly pro-republic and against the monarchy. One thing I noticed about halfway through reading this book is that this book suffers from a trope known as the Smurfette syndrome, where there is exactly one female character in the entirety of the story who has any amount of screen time. There are a few others mentioned, mostly in connection with poor young Carrot, who joins the City Watch, whose main character trait is being naive. So he keeps mentioning the girlfriend that he left behind in his home village, a dwarf named Minty, who is, I believe, over 100 years old and doesn't seem all that interested in him. She's mentioned in his letters to his parents. He also ends up staying at the local brothel and talks with very high regard of the ladies that he lives with, in particular his friend Reet. But again, she doesn't actually appear on the page. She is just a sort of side note in the story of young Carrot. But the one character who does appear on stage, on page, the Smurfette in this situation, is one Lady Sybil Ramkin, who is introduced to us because she is a dragon breeder. And since the city is having troubles with one enormous dragon who is quite literally setting the city on fire, that was hard to say, the Watch goes to her house to interview her for her expertise in breeding swamp dragons, which are basically cats. you little swamp dragon. Swamp dragons are tiny versions of dragons that have very bad digestive systems and are prone to blowing themselves up. And Lady Sybil is this character trope of the posh, rich lady who breeds insert animal of your choice. I think traditionally it would be dogs or horses. There's a sort of idea of the upper class horse lady who walks around in dirty wellies and has more money than you can ever imagine and has her head full of animals and doesn't care about anything else. And Lady Sybil is that character, and she's a very well executed version of that character. She very soon sort of joins the investigation purely because of her expertise with dragons, albeit little ones, when the city's problem is really an enormous dragon. If a book is only going to have one female character, it better be a bloody good one. And I'm glad that Lady Sybil is that. I still would have enjoyed at least one other female character, but I have been assured by fans of the Citywatch series that we will get that in future books, so I'm not giving up on that yet. Just something I'd like to point out. Terry Pratchett is extremely good at writing female characters, at least in the books that I've read so far. Therefore, it's a shame that he didn't add more of them into this story, because there certainly would have been space. But Lady Sybil is wonderful, and I really enjoyed her as a character, the relationship she builds with, in particular, Sam, but also the other members of the Citywatch. And she brings a dimension to this book that's fun and dynamic. She, as a character, doesn't really belong in the police procedural. She's not your typical woman in a crime story. I mean, because she's the middle-aged, rich dragon breeder. She's not a murder victim. Her role in the plot of the story is fun. It's unpredictable, and she just fits in really well. Terry Pratchett has a gift of writing parody comedy that's hilarious. I mean, actually laugh out loud hilarious. I don't often laugh while I'm reading, but I certainly did while reading this book. And then within the same paragraph, he can write an absolutely hilarious, very clever joke, a really terrible pun that you wish you'd never seen, and he can write an absolutely heartbreaking sentence that'll make you question everything about yourself. And that mix makes all of his Discworld novels very unique, but works particularly well in this one. It's more instantly appealing than many other Discworld novels that I've read, because it doesn't just rely on the aspect of satire, and it doesn't just rely on the aspect of characters. Terry Pratchett is excellent at writing characters, but this one also has a compelling plot that, in particular, if you're a fan of detective mysteries, will pull you right in, will have you guessing, will have you speculating, and will have you wanting to get to the end of the story so you can see how much you were right about and how much you were wrong about. I would say I was pretty good at guessing what was going on. There were a few big reveals that I figured out, I'm quite pleased about. And there were plenty that I was wrong about, that I fell for the red herring, or that I just did not see coming at all, including actually the final resolution of the story. I couldn't have guessed how that was going to turn out. Overall, what can I say? I had a lot of fun reading this book. I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed the relationships they built. This book made me want to read about every single one of them. And I hope that all of these characters are going to reappear in future books of the Citywatch sequence. I'm certainly going to continue reading those. And I hope that if you are at all into detective mysteries, you will enjoy Guards just as much as I did. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.